Elegoo sent me their new Mars 3 Ultra 4K, and we're going to check it out and see if it's any good for a budget 4K printer. This is basically the upgraded version of the Elegoo Mars 2 Pro, with some aesthetic changes. As you can tell right off the bat, it has a sleeker design to it, and it's still using the acrylic dome, but the printer is no longer a perfect square, so it only goes on one way. That being said, this is fresh out of the box, so here's some satisfying peels of the protective layers. So with that little bit of ASMR out of the way, let's check out the actual build of the machine. The Z-axis is pretty much the same as the Mars 2 Pro, using a lead screw and a linear rail. The build plate assembly is also very similar to previous printers from Elegoo, being held on with just one large screw on the top. It is a bit bigger than the Mars 2 Pro and smaller than the Saturn, so it's basically the middle of the three. As you can see, I have these little hanger things on my other build plates, and it's going to be no different for the Mars 3. The version for the Mars and the Mars 2 will also fit the Mars 3. And these things are very easy to install and very helpful for hanging your pieces to drip dry. You can find a link to the file for this in the description below. I did print these out using an FDM printer and PLA, but I'm sure you can print one on the Mars 3 if you don't have another printer. When you get these machines, you do need to level them, and that requires removing the resin vat. And it looks like they use the through bolts from the Saturn instead of the clamping system they used on the Mars before. I actually prefer this, seeing that I could just pick up the vat and not have to deal with any of the clamps. So another feature that is taken from the Saturn are the little feet that will keep your vat from sitting completely flat on a surface and keeping your FEP sheet from being damaged from sitting on top of something. As an example, here is the Mars 3's vat next to a Mars 2 Pro vat. And sadly, due to the size difference and the mounting difference, you cannot use any of the Mars 2 Pro or Mars vats on the Mars 3. But anyways, back to leveling. Make sure that both of the adjustment screws are loose so your build plate can freely move, and then just home it onto a piece of printer paper on the screen. The paper should be pinned between the build plate and the screen, and it shouldn't really move out of it. Now just go ahead and take the Allen wrench that came with the printer and tighten up the two bolts on the build plate. Once you have that done, all you need to do is move the build plate up by 0.1 millimeters until the paper kind of moves but has a lot of drag on it. In my case, I had to move it up twice. Once you have that done, you can back out of this control screen, and we're just going to set our Z0 to this position, and we are done setting up the machine, and it should be ready to print now. I'm going to do the Rook test print that is already on the flash drive that came with the printer, and I'll be doing it in some plant-based transparent resin from Elegoo. So I have no idea what settings they're using for this print, so I thought using some of their resin would probably work out and be the safest bet. And this print took about 2.5 hours to complete. But by the looks of it, this was a successful print, and they look pretty good so far. That being said, we won't really know until we wash them off in something like this. This is the Elegoo Mercury Plus. It's a very nice all-in-one wash and cure system that I happen to use all the time. But what if we had something a bit bigger, like this? This is the new Mercury X wash and cure system that Elegoo is also nice enough to send over. As you can see, it is two individual parts, one for washing and one for curing, that can actually be used at the same time. There is a little bit of assembly required for the curing side, but nothing too major. And you might also be happy to know that it comes with one power supply that powers both of the units. On the washing side of things, it has this nice sealed top that will minimize fumes and evaporation of your alcohol, along with this metal raft bracket to hold your build plate, and this very large metal basket for loose pieces. The container part itself is not attached to the base, and it has a magnetic stirrer in the bottom. So with the top metal bracket installed, you can fit an entire Elegoo Saturn's build plate in here. Or you can fit two Mars 3 or Mars 2 Pro plates in here as well. You might have also noticed that this thing is massive, and it's going to take a lot of alcohol. I'm putting over a gallon in this, and it's still not going to fill it all the way, but it'll be just up to the point where my build plate sits. But with it all filled up and ready to go, all you need to do is take your build plate and put it inside of it. And don't forget to put your lid on top of it as well, just so you can cut down on the fumes and keep your alcohol from evaporating. Actually, setting and using the machine is really easy. You just long press on the screen part of it, turn the dial to set your time, and just push the screen to start it. This will start the agitator inside and clean off your parts. And when it hits the halfway mark on your timer, it'll stop and then switch directions. With that all done, we should now have perfectly clean parts, and we need to take them off the build plate using a scraper. So with all the extra resin cleaned off of them, you can actually look at the pieces and see how detailed and crisp everything is. But we do still need to cure these, so into the curing side they go. So the curing side has the same knob controls as the wash side, and it works exactly the same, besides the fact that it controls the lights coming on and off and the spinning turntable. But here they are completely finished, and they look really nice. They did get a little bit of a tan, but this is a very common thing with a lot of clear resins. I did leave one in the sun for about 5 hours to see if the browning effect would get any worse, and it's exactly the same as it was. So I have a bunch of different resins from a bunch of different brands, and they are all different in their print settings and how hard they are to actually print. So let's try some castable resins and see how well they do, seeing that they're on the harder end of things to actually print right. So first up is some Siraya Tech Cast, which is their new castable resin. And I honestly do like the toxic looking purple that this stuff comes in, which won't matter at all for casting, but I just like the look of it. After about an hour and 45 minutes, I have my first ring print, and it looks like it actually came out really nice with very sharp and clean details. The only real problem it has is on the back end, it looks like it had some sort of layer problem and a little bit of droopiness in the back, which might just mean that I need to up my times on curing per layer. And I'll be doing a dedicated video to this resin in the future. So next up is some castable resin from eSun, and I used the same model and the same settings for this one, and so far it looks like it came out successful. After cleaning it up, it looks like it has a lot of visible large layer lines, mostly near the top of the model, and just one on the back end of the band. But like I said before, castable resins are very difficult to print with, and you really have to dial in your settings. And for just kind of throwing settings at these that have worked on others in the past, these came out really good, and they're completely fixable. So for the last resin I'm going to be using is some resin from Creality, which I didn't even know Creality made resin, but I guess they do now. I'm going to max out the vat with the resin, and test out how it does printing miniatures. As for the miniatures I'm going to be printing, they're from Archvillain Games, and you've probably seen their work before if you've watched any other resin 3D printing videos from other creators. And I can totally see why, seeing that these are very detailed and interesting looking pieces. The one that I'm printing right now was pre-supported, and it is at 200% scale. So after about 4.5 hours this print is finally done, and it looks like everything printed fine, but I need to remove all these supports now. But with that minimal cleanup, here's how it looks. And as you can tell, I didn't go crazy cleaning it up. There's still visible areas where supports were, but you should be able to get the gist of how the details came out and how the actual print looks. Seeing that I've only been printing one model at a time, I thought I'd fill the entire build plate with as many as I can. So these are all the miniatures with their base plates, all printed at once. But as you can see, even at this small scale, they have a ton of detail in them. And this is even with me forgetting to turn off anti-aliasing, so they could be even more crisp. So here are all the prints that I used in this video, all side by side so you can get a reference for scale. So all in all, this printer does a really good job at printing, and as you've seen in this video, you can use it for multiple applications. And with it having a 4K screen, I believe this might be one of the cheapest 4K printers that you can get your hands on. But with that said, this printer is not without its own flaws. For example, mine came with some cosmetic damage from probably shipping on the acrylic top. And it also came with this weird blemish underneath the screen that I can't get rid of. But honestly, these are cosmetic and do not affect the performance whatsoever. And there is some controversy about the software that you have to use to slice your files for this printer. Because it's running on the new Chitu Systems board, you are locked into using Chitubox Basic, which is free, or Chitubox Pro, which has a yearly subscription fee. This means you can't really use any third-party software with this printer. You can use other programs to make all your supports, but you're going to have to save that and import it into Chitubox to slice it. I did reach out to Chitubox and ask them about all of this, and they said that they're going to be releasing a SDK for development. So knowing that, I reached out to Mango 3D, which is the creator of Lychee Slicer, and asked them about the SDK and what their plans were, and here is their response. We don't have any information about the SDK. We don't know what it will provide, and more importantly, what will be the condition to access it. So far, we don't know more than what was posted by Chitubox online about the SDK. We can only hope that it will be a file format description and not a library to integrate, because you never know what can be in a closed library from another software editor. They also hope that they will not put any fees on their SDK to use their file format for commercial use. And if that happened, they would have to charge the users for using these printers, which it doesn't seem like they really want to do. But like they said, they don't know anything about the SDK and they have no more information than we do. And those are just their hopes and thoughts on it. And every Mars printer will come with a 1-year paid subscription of Chitubox Pro, so you can try it out for a year, and if you don't end up liking it or whatever, you can switch to the basic one and you can still use the machine. And I guess the last little bit of this is going to be about the Z-wobble that people have been talking about. Another YouTuber called Veg Oil Guy pointed out that there is motion in the Z axis when printing on this, so there is a Z-wobble, which I was also able to clearly see on my machine. And from what I've seen so far, 3D Printing Pro also had the same problem. And Uncle Jesse mentioned it in his video, but his had no movement whatsoever. But honestly, from what I've seen, this doesn't affect my prints whatsoever, and 3D Printing Pro pretty much said the same thing. So I thought I would test this out on my Mars 2 Pro and see if it moves, because I've never checked. And it does. And I've done tons of prints on this thing with no problems whatsoever, so I really don't think this is going to be a problem, but who knows, time will only tell. Granted, all of these machines are the early review models, so this might not even be a thing when the actual production ones are shipped. I just wanted to help get out all the information I possibly could to help you in your decision if you wanted to get one of these or not. Personally, I really like the printer a lot, and it's going to be a welcome tool on my channel, seeing that I'm going to be doing some more casting videos, and a 4K screen and resolution is going to help with my casting. I'm going to leave links to everything I talked about in this video below, and if you are interested in buying the Chitubox Pro, I do have a discount code from them if you want to use it. But that's going to be totally up to you, and I suggest getting the free trial and test it out first, and see if you even like it. Well, that's about it for this video. Leave a comment if you have any questions, and I will try to get back to you as soon as possible or find someone that has the answers. Leave a like on this video if you found it helpful whatsoever, and subscribe to my channel. Well, I'll see you guys next time.